The Monster in the Labyrinth. Long, long ago in Greece, there lived a brave young prince called Theseus. His father was King Aegeus, and he ruled the beautiful city of Athens. One day, when Theseus was down by the harbour, he saw a crowd of people, all weeping. 7 young men and 7 maidens were being taken aboard a black-sailed ship, their hands tied together with cords. "Who are all these people on the quay?" Theseus asked a sailor. "Oh, they're the families of the 14 victims to be sacrificed. You see the 7 young men and the 7 maidens? They're being sent to Crete. Poor souls. How I pity them." "Why? What will happen to them?" "Bless you, boy, don't you know? They are to be fed to the terrible Minotaur that lives in the labyrinth." Theseus had heard of the Minotaur, the hideous monster with the body of a giant man and the head of a bull. It had deadly horns, enormous teeth, and lived in a vast maze in the cellars of the palace on Crete, devouring human beings. So many were the passages of the labyrinth that no one who entered could ever find their way out. Theseus rushed back to his father's palace. "Father," he cried, "I have just seen 14 young Athenians being taken aboard ship bound for Crete. Why must we send them to be sacrificed to that terrible beast, the Minotaur?" "Because, my son, long ago there was a war between Athens and Crete. Athens was defeated, and ever since then we have had to send a tribute to Crete every 7 years, a tribute of human sacrifices. If we do not send these 7 young men and 7 maidens to be fed to the Minotaur, the king of Crete will start the war again, and many of our people will die." "But what if the Minotaur was killed?" "No one has ever come out of the labyrinth alive. Either the Minotaur kills them, or they are lost forever in the maze." Theseus ran back to the harbour, down to the ship with the black sails, to where the young men and maidens were waiting. Their families and friends were still weeping on the dockside. "People of Athens," he shouted, "do not weep, for I am going to Crete to slay the Minotaur." And with these words, Theseus boarded the ship and set sail for Crete. After many days at sea, they arrived at the beautiful island of Crete. High on a cliff stood the magnificent marble palace of King Minos. His soldiers led the young men and maidens up the cliff path. Inside the palace, everything was painted gold and silver. The rooms were full of the richest furniture, with fighting bulls and leaping dolphins painted on every wall. In the great hall, King Minos sat on a golden throne. He had a long white beard and wore silk robes. "I expected only 14. Why does King Aegeus send 15? Theseus stepped forward. "I am Prince Theseus, son of King Aegeus. I have come to slay the Minotaur and free my people from this terrible debt." "Brave words," said the king with an evil smile. "Since you are so keen to meet our monster, you can be the first man to enter the labyrinth tomorrow." In a corner of the great hall stood the lovely Princess Ariadne. When she saw Theseus, she fell in love with him at once. "I must help this brave and handsome young man," she thought. That night, she crept to his room. "Prince Theseus," she whispered, "I cannot help you slay the Minotaur, but I can help you escape from the labyrinth. You must accept my help, or you will die." "Gladly, princess," replied Theseus. "Then take this sword and this ball of thread and hide them under your robe. When you enter the maze, tie the end of the thread to the door and unwind it as you go through the dark corridors. It's your only hope of finding your way out once you've killed the Minotaur. I will wait for you at the door. You must take me with you back to Athens. My father will kill me if he discovers I have helped you to escape." "Of course I will, princess," said Theseus gently, "for I already love you." At dawn the next day, the king's soldiers led Theseus down to the labyrinth. When the door closed behind him, he was plunged into darkness. Taking the ball of thread out from under his robe, Theseus tied one end to the door. He could feel the steep walls of rock on either side of him. Slowly, he made his way down the narrow path, uncoiling the thread as he went. Further on, a little light crept down through the palace floor, and he could see heaps of skulls and bones on the ground. Then he heard a terrible roar echoing through the passages. The dreadful sound came nearer and nearer. Theseus could feel the thud of the monster's feet coming towards him. Suddenly, the hideous creature leapt at him, bellowing and roaring. But the prince sprang aside, clinging to the rock. Then the beast lunged at him, and this time Theseus struck him a mighty blow on the chest. The Minotaur fell back, stunned, and Theseus grabbed hold of its huge, sharp horns. With all his might, he held the beast down. The Minotaur roared again, gnashing its enormous teeth. Theseus swiftly drew his sword and thrust it 3 times into the Minotaur's heart. The beast roared once more, and then lay still. In the darkness, Theseus fumbled for the dropped reel of thread. He found it, and then followed it, hand over hand, through the dark, winding corridors of the labyrinth. At last, he reached the door where Ariadne was standing. Seeing Theseus spotted with blood, she rushed up to him and embraced him passionately. "We must hurry, or my father's guards will find us." Then Ariadne led Theseus to where their ship lay anchored. There, waiting for them, were the 7 youths and 7 maidens. And as the sun rose, they set sail for Athens. George and the Dragon. The hideous creature crawled out of the lake. The big lake where the people of the town went to draw their water. But when it lay down on the bank of the lake, nobody dared go there anymore. Its broad tail completely encircled the water. Its scaly green body sank into the mud of the bank. Its leathery wings flapped to keep off the heat of the sun. Its eyelids drooped, and beneath them, green eyes glittered. It was the wickedest and most foul dragon anyone had ever seen. The people shut the gates of the town. They locked their doors and they barred their windows. But they felt no safer. The dragon was bigger than the church, bigger than the king's palace. If it was to come looking for food, there was nothing they could do to keep it out. That night, they heard it leave the lake and drag itself through the sucking mud. Squawk, squawk, squawk went its feet. Scarr, scarr went its scaly tail, dragging along the road. Fire roared from its nostrils as it burned down the town gates. It looked in at all the windows. The women screamed, the children cried, the men hid. And in the palace, the Princess Sabra prayed. The dragon went on looking among the houses, its empty stomach rumbling like thunder. "It's hungry!" cried the people. "It's looking for food!" And they trembled in their beds. Roar! Went the dragon as it came thundering down the street, crushing those fleeing in terror from their homes. The dragon continued its heavy, thudding step, looking to either side of him. It was as if he was searching for something. Then it turned, and with a huge gush of fire from its nose, it set light to a whole row of houses. In the morning, as smoke drifted across the city, the great creature was back beside the lake. "We must give the beast what it wants, whatever it is," said the king. So he sent for Balthazar, the wisest man in the kingdom, and asked him what the dragon was looking for. "It seeks the purest and most beautiful young woman in the city," said Balthazar. "It wishes to eat her." The king's face grew dark and sad. His own daughter, the Princess Sabra, was without doubt the purest and most beautiful young woman in the whole kingdom. Everybody said so. "I won't give her up to the dragon," said the king. "I can't." But that night, the dragon came back to the city, looking for the purest and most beautiful young woman. And when it could not find her, it set fire to another row of houses. "The city will be destroyed if you don't give the dragon what it wants," cried the people. And eventually, the king had to agree. The beautiful Princess Sabra was taken out through the ruined gates of the city and then tied to a wooden post just beyond. The dragon raised its head off its green, scaly paws and dragged its body out of the mud. It spread its wings and half ran, half flew towards the princess. Just then, a knight stopped his horse beside the lake to let it drink. His name was George, the bravest man in all the kingdom. Glancing towards the town, he saw the dragon hovering over the princess, its wings casting a great shadow over her. Its neck was arched, its great mouth gaped open. The heat of its terrible breath had charred the hem of her white dress and the ends of her golden hair. The knight mounted his horse and galloped towards the dragon. "Stop!" he shouted. "I am George, the bravest knight in the kingdom. You shall not devour the lady until you have fought me." The dragon turned, green and raging like a great winged crocodile. Its fire scorched the saddlecloth of George's horse, but the knight raised his shield and the flames turned back off it onto the dragon. Then George lowered the visor on his helmet and rode down on the beast, his lance level, his shield held close to his chest. But the dragon bit right through the lance and spat it out. Its claws lashed at George and pulled him from the saddle so that his helmet and cloak were lost. Then George raised his battle axe. With both hands, he swung it round and round his head and struck a blow where he thought the dragon's heart must be. But the dragon had no heart, and the axe shattered into a dozen pieces. The great green tail knocked George off his feet. Then he drew out his long sword. With both hands, he swung it round and round his head, ran in under the dragon's green and scaly chest, and plunged the sword between two scales. The ground shook as the dragon roared and yowled and rolled over on its back, clawing the air. Stepping bravely forward, George raised his broadsword and with all his strength brought it down on the dragon's head. When the people saw that the dragon was dead, they waved and clapped and cheered. George freed the Princess Sabra from the wooden post, and hand in hand, they went to see the king. "State your reward," said the king, hugging and kissing his daughter. "You shall have any reward you name if it is within my power." So George named as his reward the most beautiful young bride in the whole kingdom, the Princess Sabra.
Stolen Thunder. Thor, god of thunder, woke up in Valhalla. It was a beautiful morning, and Thor was full of life.
"Today, I shall hammer on the mountains until the whole world shakes to the sound of my thunder. The noise will echo down the fjords and shatter icebergs in the northern sea."
And he sprang out of bed.
"Now, where did I put that hammer?"
But Thor's magic hammer, the thunderbolt, was nowhere to be seen. He looked under his bed. He lifted up his clothes, the thunderclouds, which were scattered around his bedroom. He emptied his cavernous cupboards. He opened his door, and his voice boomed through the great hall of Valhalla.
"Where's my hammer?"
In the end, his friend Odin had to come and help him look, and realized that Thor's hammer had been stolen.
"But who would dare to steal from Valhalla?"
Roared Odin, king of the gods. "Who but the giants?" said Loki, god of mischief. So Odin comforted Thor and tried to calm him down, while Loki borrowed the flying cloak from Queen Freya, wife of Odin. And Loki flew down to the realm of giants. The first person he met there was the giant Din. "Do you know where Thor's hammer is?" Loki asked. Din, the biggest and the dirtiest of the giants, grinned from ear to ear. He scratched himself, and a cloud of dust rose up and made him sneeze. But he wiped his nose on his sleeve and went on grinning.
"Yes, I know where Thor's hammer is. It's buried 50 fathoms deep under the ground. I know, because I put it there myself. And I won't give it back until Queen Freya comes down here to be my bride." He laughed, opening a mouth as deep, dark, and dirty as a cave, with teeth like broken rocks. "And when you send her, tell her to bring her flying cloak and her golden necklace."
Loki kept his temper and smiled evenly. Then he flew back to Valhalla and repeated the message to Odin, king of the gods. "Din will not give back Thor's hammer unless we give him your wife, Freya, as a bride." Odin's eyes blazed with anger. Grey and wild like the sea, then white and swirling like the sky, then hot and red as fire. My wife as his bride? Ah, said Loki, but I have a plan. Two bright shapes flew down through the clouds and across a dark landscape to the door of Din the giant. Loki had brought a bride for Din, wrapped in the magic cloak and adorned with the gorgeous golden jewelry of Freya, queen of the gods. Then Din prepared a sumptuous wedding feast. The tables groaned under the weight of food and the barrels of red wine. All the giants were there, though none of them had washed specially, and their scrawny dogs slunk under the tables, scrounging any food that was dropped. Din watched with delight as his bride sat down to eat. First, she ate a side of roast beef, then a shoulder of pork, then a broiled swan. Then she picked her teeth with a blade bone. And she drank so much wine that Din had to send out for more.
She's got quite an appetite, this Freya of yours, said Din. How does she keep her figure?
That's easily explained, Loki replied smoothly. She hasn't eaten all day because she's so thrilled at the thought of marrying you. Din blushed.
Well, so she wants me that much, does she?
You've never seen a woman more excited. I almost think she must have been secretly in love with you for years and years. Din jumped to his feet.
For that, she deserves a kiss. Come here, my little sugar mouse.
But his bride looked at Din with eyes as blue and wild as the sea, which then turned as white and swirling as the sky, then as hot and red as fire. Din gulped and stepped back, rather alarmed.
Why is she looking at me like that?
He whispered to Loki. Can't you tell? Answered Loki. She couldn't sleep a wink last night for the thought of you. And now she sees you, she can't take her eyes off you.
Well,
said Din nervously.
good.
As the banquet came to an end, Loki coughed politely and remarked, I don't like to mention it on so happy an occasion, but do you think we could have Thor's hammer back now? That was the agreement. And Din clapped Loki on the back and roared,
Of course, Loki, old friend. A deal's a deal. I get the woman, you get the hammer. Servants, bring me Thor's thunderbolt right away.
The doors opened wide, and a steely grey hammer was carried in. 3 giants staggered and grunted under its weight. Then Din laid the hammer down in front of Loki.
How I wish Odin was here.
Din gloated, edging towards his bride.
I'd give anything to see his face when Freya sits on my lap and starts kissing me.
You have your wish, bellowed the bride. And there, throwing off his disguise, stood Odin, king of the gods. He snatched up the hammer.
And here you shall have your kisses.
He swung the massive hammer in the air and smashed it down 3 times on Odin's fat head. Then Odin swept through the hall, felling giants on every side. Within seconds, all lay sprawling on the ground, and the dog gobbled up the rest of the banquet. Odin and Loki flew back to Valhalla, where Freya and Thor were waiting. Thank heavens, she said. I don't know why you're wearing that dress, dear, but I'm glad to see you've got Thor's hammer back. He's been impossible since it was stolen. With the hammer back in his hands, Thor was happy again. He whooped with joy, and then he beat on the mountain tops until the whole world shook and the thunder echoed down the fjords and shattered icebergs in the northern sea.